What's up, everybody? It is I, JuiceMan39 and 41, the gamer that tells you the way it is. Welcome to episode 98, Our Money, Our Time. Hey, thank you for watching my last video, and tonight I want to talk about our money, our time. This is an interesting subject that's got me perplexed and thinking. You know, a lot of gamers out there complain necessity. They complain non-stop. They complain about how if they, for instance, play a game and they beat it in 6 or 7 hours, that they feel like it wasn't their money's worth. We seem to be under the impression that a game should give us 100 hours or more in gameplay for our money's worth. The fact that games do cost a lot of money to make nowadays, much sum up into the $150 million, $200 million, $300 million. It makes you wonder, though. Our money, our time. You know, it's our money, so we deserve more time with the game. I guess what I'm saying is that does gamers or gaming community as a whole focus strictly on the amount of time that you can play this game versus maybe the overall quality of it or narrative quality of it? So I propose to you a question, and please feel free to comment. How many games in the last year that you as a gamer have actually completed? You started the game, you went through its entire narrative, and you saw the end of the game. And I'd almost suspect, because the industry is very driven around giving us like a ridiculous amount of content. You know, how many of you all have done that? I'll talk about my own gaming experiences. In the last year, have I completed from start to finish, like to see the actual ending of any particular game that's in my current library, digital or retail? And the answer to that, to be perfectly frank with you, is 2. Now, I own probably right around 125 to 130 digital titles, and the 2 games that I finished from start to finish, saw the ending and all that, was Agents of Mayhem. I subsequently went back and leveled everybody up, but I saw its ending, the story and narrative for all the characters. And then I want to say that the second game that I went through would be Dynasty Warriors 9. And I went through with the main factions: Liu Bei, Cao Cao, Sun Jian, and all the characters that are in the main course, and Shu Zhao from the Jin, and saw their main stories. But other than that, I have legitimately finished almost nothing. There's almost so much content in my games that I feel like I'll never finish these games, because I know it's going to take not just hours, but weeks, if not months, to finish it. Today's episode is brought to you by Razzmatazz, or Blue Raz from Spike Punch. I totally recommend it. It's one of the only Steel Reserve ones that actually has a beautiful flavor. It's blue. It is 8%, but it doesn't have that super strong alcoholic taste, and it's a great beverage. That's good. The whole thing I'm saying is our money, our time. So let's go back to the Order 1886. That game, if you take your time with it, will take about 4 or 5 hours to complete. And be that as it may, it's interesting to me to look back at that game and think, like, okay, even if you did all the side stuff, a 4 or 5 hour game, and people were really, really angry about this. They didn't like the fact that it has a very short span. There's no multiplayer. There isn't a whole lot of side. The game company tried to create a more cinematic type game experience for it, but everybody was so butthurt about it. But the quality of the game was there. The graphics were great. The up close and personal finishers are brutal. It's a fun game. It's got great voice acting, and regardless of how people feel about that game, now I only paid $5 for it, so I'm not really too butthurt about its length. But even at $60, like, I mean, why do every game that comes out that we demanded to have 200 hours, 300, 400 hours of gameplay? Why can't we just be okay with a $60 title with a 10 or 15-hour campaign, maybe even less, maybe let's say 8-hour campaign? Because that, we're not going to sit down in most instances and play that game 8 hours straight, back to back. We're going to turn it off, take a break, come back to it tomorrow, maybe finishing up 3-4 days. That is enough content as far as I'm concerned. We don't need to have, a blue million bunch of hours in every single game that gets released. Yes, it's our money, it's our time, but do we really need to have all of our games, every game that comes out, whether it's a first-person shooter, a third-person shooter? I mean, RPGs inherently have a lot of time and hours into it, but does every single game come out because we just feel like we're entitled to a game that it should have 400 or 500 hours of gameplay? And again, I ask you, go back through your library. How many games have you finished? You started the game at the beginning and you went through the narrative and you saw the ending. How many games have you, in your own personal library, where you have 2 games in the library or 100, how many have you actually seen to its end? And I'd say the percentage of players out there that have not done that is very high versus the people who have. I literally, as I just stated earlier, have well over 125 digital titles. I probably have about 5 or 6 retail titles, and only 2 games have I completed from start to finish. And because I feel like there is an expectation. I spend $60 on a game, I expect to be playing it for 6 months. But let's face facts, people. We jump around from game to game. We don't play the same game over and over every day. There's probably a percentage of people who do, but there's probably a percentage of people who don't. I get hooked on games for a while. I remember in 2015 when Dynasty Warriors 8 Empires came out, and I loved the game, and I played it pretty much 3 or 4 hours a day every day for about 3 weeks. Going through different scenarios, doing different builds, trying out different weapons, but I eventually stopped playing it. And but when it comes down to it, I feel like it's our money and our time, but we're not entitled. We don't need to pressure a game company out there who's creating a game when they're just trying to give us a really cool narrative and maybe a cool story and some environments to traverse through. Because Sid Meier had once said that games are basically just a series of choices, interesting, unique choices. But if you're a gamer out there, should we demand Activision, EA, Ubisoft, and publishers and the game developers that are under their banner, look, we're not satisfied. I'm not going to pay $60 if all I get is 12 hours out of this game. You have to remember, though, I cut my teeth on games back in the original 8-bit NES era, Super Nintendo era, where some of these games only lasted 2-3 hours. But and the funny thing about that is I was totally okay with that. And those games were, $50. And like you could burn through them in one sitting, no problem. It was only a handful of titles you couldn't, which is the RPGs, of course, and like your Metroid games. But my point is that you go to the store at GameStop now, and you look at a game. Let's say you're looking at the wall. Let's say you're an Xbox player, a PS4 player, whatever you are, Switch, whatever. I mean, you look at a game and the game comes out. It's $59.99. You don't know exactly how much content's in that game. But should you be entitled to this content? Why can't a company put out a very high quality game, graphically, gameplay that's solid? Why do we need to have every game be 100, 200, 300 hour experience? Because they really don't need to be. I get games like, are inherent, like role play style games are going to give you those. I mean, you could devote 300 hours into Witcher 3. You could devote 300 hours into Skyrim. Those games inherently are designed for length of title. But when you play like a Call of Duty, or you play a Battlefield, or you play a Gears of War, or you play a Recore, or you play Horizon Zero Dawn or a Far Cry, look, no offense to those games, but I don't want to sit there and play a campaign that's 100 hours long. That's fucking ridiculous. I don't have the time or the energy to do that. If the Far Cry campaign gives me some side shit to do and I can legitimately beat the whole game in 6 hours, then so be it. If you stop and do the math, let's say that the Far Cry 5 campaign is only 6 hours long. Then you paid $10 for an hour of enjoyment. Okay, so you pay about $10 to get about 2 hours to 2.5 hours. Maybe you might pay more at the IMAX, $13, $14 to go to the movies. It ain't much different. You're just paying the $60 to have more time. It is our time. It is our money. I don't think game industry people out there should just say, fuck it, we're only going to give us gamers 3 hours of gameplay. No. I think that's ridiculous. But I think when it comes to certain genres of games, that if a game company only gives us a 10-hour campaign and there isn't a whole lot, maybe there's no multiplayer, maybe there isn't a whole lot of deviation in like what you can do in the game, hey, you know what, just accept it. I don't want to continuously buy games. I had a conversation with a friend of mine last year, and we talked about how like it seems like every game now that comes out, it's not even like on us, and we might be partially responsible, but it's like every game that comes out is either an open world game or an RPG or an open world RPG, or it's an open world with a bunch of RPG elements with a lot of action elements. Look at GTA 5. It's both an RPG, an MMO, a shooter, a third person game with cover, a driving game. I mean, it's literally every genre. And you know what? Yes, the on-load mode's not something you can beat. It doesn't have a story per se. It does, but it don't. But my point is that every game that comes out seems these companies are under so much pressure to deliver that they want to make them 200 hours, 300, 400 hours. You need to play this game for the next 6 months, 7 months. We are partially to blame for the live service issues, and we don't really want to keep buying a game that's incomplete and then 2 years later it's great, as I keep talking about, which is exactly what Ubisoft does, what EA does, Activision, they do it. It's kind of like, hey, the game's going to be really good a year and a half from now once we update it, but the whole live service thing, oh, come on, man. It's like, I think we as gamers, we bear some of that responsibility. You know what I mean? Like, we bear some of that responsibility. We don't like the live service, but yet we demanded our games to be longer than 10 and 15 hours long because it's our money and it's our time. Quality versus quantity. And now that's role reversed. It's quantity versus quality. If we play a game and we beat it in 20 hours, we're pissed about it. But maybe that's the point. We need a good story, a good narrative. Something that engrosses us and brings us into the fray. Multiplayer, I really feel like, was just designed for players to have something else to do with a game that they enjoyed going through. But anymore, I'm not trying to devote 300 hours to every single game that comes out. Look at everything that's in the pipeline now. How many of you are going to beat those games going forward? Not to mention the number of free-to-play shit that's out there, from Warframe, which is excellent, to Fortnite, which has taken like the gaming industry by storm, that everyone's trying to copy and ride coattails on that. I mean, think about that. What games have you in your library have you sat down and completed from start to finish? Can they even be done in a reasonable amount of time? The answer, more or less, is no. I can go through my library and I sit there and go, holy shit! I've got a bazillion games there that I could, like, I think I've maybe not even gotten to the halfway point because I have so much. Because it seems like every time I turn around, every month there's 1 or 2 games coming out that I want to play, I want to buy, I want to own. Not to mention the 1 or 2 titles I might have missed, that came out a couple months ago or maybe last year, and now they're cheap and I want to pick them up. It's like, wow. We don't even get to finish this stuff. This episode is our money, our time. I'm on the side of the gamer. I'm on the side of the gaming community. I do not give a fuck about these publishers and how they're doing their microtransaction, all that. I've already talked about this. Everyone's talked about this. It's not right. But the point is, fellas, the point is, ladies and gentlemen out there in the gaming community, the people who watch my channel, I'm making a point. We can't always demand that these publishers and game developers give us games that are 300 and 400 hours long, because we never finish them. We'll never get around to it. It's just too much. There's too much good coming out. We need to be satisfied and not give them a hard time if the game's very short. Let it be short. You can actually go, wow, I actually beat one of my games in my library, right? Yes, let's say, Battlefront 2 is 4-hour campaign tops. It has a lot of issues with its pacing, its character development. I get it. But at least it's something you can get through in a short amount of time. And all the other stuff that's added, the multiplayer and everything, you can just play that on the side. But a lot of developers out there, we put pressure on them. Maybe they don't want to make a game that's long. Maybe they don't want to keep adding a bunch of useless content. Look at Ubisoft. Look at Far Cry 5 or 4. Look at games with the open world. Look at the Assassin's Creeds. Look at even Agents of Mayhem. Look at these games that have, like, every time you go down the map, there's like 1,000,001 things flooding the map with 1,001 icons, and you're like, Jesus Christ, there's too much to do. I just want to get through the story. I want, it's like, it's just too much. I think, in the end, we should be satisfied with the fact that we're getting some of these awesome games at all. And if a game comes out, ladies and gentlemen, and you happen to sit down and you beat it in 2-3 days, then be happy that you did. Not every game has to be 300 or 400 hours long. They don't. I get it. $60. It takes me like it takes me like 5 hours of my own job to make $60. I get that. But, at the same time, we shouldn't be so, like, hardcore and hell-bent on making sure, hey, my game better have, I better be able to play this game for the next 6 months. But 6 months down the road, are you even still playing it? You've done moved on to something else? Again, I challenge you as gamers. Take a game in your library, whether it's retail or digital. I challenge you, as people subscribe to my channel, the people who like to hear the Juice Man talk. I'm telling you, take a game that you've been meaning to finish and just finish the damn thing, right? Take the time, right? But also, if a game comes out, let's say tomorrow, or let's say a week from now, or a month from now, or towards October, and you play it, and you think, man, I just finished this game in 10 hours. Now I'm going to go on YouTube and rant about the fact that it's short. Take a moment and take a step back and say, you know what? For once, I didn't have to sit here and grind and play a game for 6 months to complete it. Right? For once, I can say, I finished this game. This has been episode 98, Our Money, Our Time. Thanks for tuning in to the Gaming Roundtable. This is the Juice Man 3941, and I am the gamer that tells you the way it is. I want to thank my subscribers, and I'm sorry that I've been away for a while. I haven't had a whole lot to talk about. We're coming up on 2 more episodes to the 100th episode. I'll be switching over to season 4, and I do appreciate you tuning in. And if you like this video, please subscribe, tell your friends about me. And as always, gamers, good gaming.